Camilleri. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So you're coming to us from London.
I am from a quite dark evening in London.
Yeah, it's actually London's one of my favorite places. A really vibrant music scene, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But yeah, so you have actually recently been named 30 under 30. I think it was from Forbes magazine. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It was April 2024, I think the list came out last.
Awesome. And you're a very influential social media impact, social marketing for artists and artist development. The name of your company is Mana, which I'm going to ask you. Actually, let's ask you now. What does Mana mean? What's that? What was that symbolizing for you?
I love talking about this. So I'm originally Maltese. I was born there. I grew up there. My family are all still there. And the word mana, it's spelled a little bit differently in Maltese, but it actually means with us or together. And when I was kind of going through names for the company, it obviously just ties in with the whole philosophy for me of doing things together and making sure that artists don't feel like they're alone. It can be a pretty sort of lonely or scary industry sometimes when you don't really know where to start. And that's one of the things I sort of try and have a bit of an impact on.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. Yeah, it's challenging being an artist, especially in today's world, trying to survive. You've worked with Warner Music, Glastonbury Festival, Believe Group, artists like David Guetta, Ayala. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Alpha and Mist. And you have just been very busy. You're also a traveler, which I noticed on your Instagram. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you have a travel bug like I do. So tell me, so you with your company, what have you been involved in terms of dealing with new artists? What does that mean when they start working with you? How do you approach it?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess across all of the sort of jobs I've had working with the various companies you sort of mentioned, it's always been a sort of a different version of artist development, be it in a sort of marketing role or in an A&R sort of capacity. Um, and I actually started my company quite a few years ago as a sort of little side project, what everyone calls a side hustle now.
Right.
Um, just kind of helping people out because as most people in the industry, your inbox is kind of always full with artists going, "Hey, can you help me with this?" or "Can you listen to my track?" Um, and I'm the type of person who doesn't like to not respond. But one person 24 hours in the day like everyone else. And I just thought, okay, well, maybe I can't, help everyone or respond to every single person, but maybe there's something I can do to at least help some people. So I sort of started trialing and almost like market researching how I could help people by just starting with like a small group of people being like, well, what do you need help with? Can I do that? Can I help you with it? And that kind of actually shaped what Mana offers now. The way it works, like how frequent the sort of servicing is, it all kind of came from, I guess, the initial core group of people who I was kind of working with. And what we really do now, sort of, it for artists directly, it's sort of career strategy, mentorship, release strategy, looking at their marketing strategy, doing like marketing audits for them, and really just being that kind of voice of reason to help them work sort of smarter versus harder. Mana's kind of developed as well. We do a few different things like speaking work and workshops and work with some companies now as well in the music industry, kind of doing partnerships for them or industry liaison for them. So it's become a little bit broader, but that's kind of the main core of the business. And I think what we really love is working directly with artists.
Yeah, and it's definitely a minefield, and depending on who you talk to, it's harder today or easier. I know it's definitely harder for artists to make an income because streaming has been both a great thing and a challenging thing. Compared to how it used to work with getting a record deal, and what does that even mean these days? How did you get started originally with in music and working in this field? What really got you going for that?
Yeah, so I think it actually started back when I was in Malta. I took part in what's kind of like I describe it as the Eurovision of like startup competitions. So it's all
Okay.
countries across Europe. You're kind of in sixth form, which is high school, I guess. You can set up a business essentially in any sort of industry you want. You compete locally. If you win locally, you go on to compete internationally, within Europe. I set up a arts management business, which went across music and photography and a bunch of other different sort of creative spaces. Won locally and went on to compete internationally. The international competition was in London. I always very much wanted to be in London, loved art. and loved business. And when I kind of realized my skill set was business, but I had this huge love for art, and I found myself in London for a couple of weeks to a couple months, sort of competing in this competition, I was like, wow, I feel like this is where I want to go. And
Right.
I initially just hopped into a music business degree because I didn't know what else to do. But whilst on that music business degree, I I think by the end of the time, I actually counted how many internships I did. I think I'd done about 6 to 8 different internships whilst working part-time to pay my rent, whilst also studying full-time.
Right. Sure.
And then that just helped me land my first sort of like fully paid job in the music industry. And it kind of just went from there.
Yeah, and the internship is a really valuable tool, right? Because you get a chance to really see how things work. You also get a chance to see which direction in whatever industry it is you want to really pursue. Because there's with music, as you know, there's a lot of different ways you can go. There's publishing, there's management, there's all sorts of different things. Um, so
Yeah.
London, how is that for you? Like that's such a vibrant scene. I've been to London several times. I know they've had a very vibrant club scene, which is it's been changing a little bit, but tell me about London and working in London, how that is for you.
I mean, I love London. It was somewhere that, like I said, I wanted to move to. I had kind of visited quite a lot as a child and just wanted to be here. And I mean, it is really great. There's loads of stuff here in terms of the music industry and loads of other adjacent industries where you can sort of cross collaborate as well. But I mean, in terms of the live scene, obviously, like everywhere else, we've really been impacted by like the pandemic and just the cost of living crisis and stuff like that, which means that venues are struggling and people don't buy as many tickets anymore, even though that's really sort of rebounded in the last couple of months to, I guess, years. But one big thing, obviously, I think we're all seeing is a lot of small venues are really struggling. Obviously, their margins are smaller. Maybe they're not attended as much, but those are the places where, like the stars of tomorrow kind of start out. So they're so, so, so important, even though they might not be as, I guess, extravagant as saying, hey, I'm playing Wembley Stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, we've heard a lot of talk about that locally, and there's, I mean, organizations like the Music Venue Trust that's doing a whole host of work on this, but it's actually quite a big problem.
Yeah, I think that like you said, there was the COVID situation and then things rebounded. It's still, they're still trying to figure all that out. Um, in terms of working with new artists, so how does that usually come about? Do you find people? Do they find you? And also too, who are some of the artists you're currently working with?
Yeah, so I mean, both ways. I feel like what's quite nice is like I've never done, I guess, traditional marketing on my own company. It's always been through just talking to people. Sometimes people get referred. Sometimes I might see something someone's doing and go, hey, it's really cool. I noticed maybe, this could be done this way if you ever want to chat. Like I'm kind of open to it. So it kind of varies. But yeah, I haven't delved yet. Maybe I will one day into, like ads or anything like that to kind of build stuff up. And then I mean, in terms of who I'm working with, I work with quite a few different artists. Some are based out in the States. It really is a sort of global reach. They probably won't be people you've heard of yet, I will
Mhm.
say, because they're obviously developing people. But I mean, some really exciting stuff is happening for some of them. So one has just gone on tour for the first time in a support slot, which is amazing. And I mean, also in the sort of wider work I do as well. We've just had some really, really exciting sort of like really established people come in and do like workshops for all of these artists and kind of, I guess, just pay it forward in terms of like giving that knowledge and trying to help and train and get people to understand sort of how to navigate what is a really weird sort of industry right now.
Yeah, and I mean, artist development is something that people talk about, but it's super important. And it's also important for artists to play small venues to kind of figure out their thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like you totally have to do that. Like you wouldn't get your household names without them, playing these small venues. I saw recently someone actually made a sort of like a poster of all of the venues. I think it was that Oasis played, when they were starting
Mm.
out, that most of them are actually gone now. And it's shocking, like when you see this tour poster and they're all kind of crossed out. Yeah, it is shocking. And it's actually one thing I hear directly from artists as well. They're like, I want a gig. The immediate thing people think of is how can I get a booking agent? But they're pre that stage because obviously booking agents need, there needs to be a certain level of revenue there for it to make sense for them. But there used to be a really vibrant sort of gigging scene where you could literally approach the venue, approach the pub, approach other bands who are putting a night on. And I mean, we still have some great jam nights, we still have some great events going on, but it's just not as vibrant as it used to be. But there's also a lot of people doing a lot of work on that to spin this to a positive. So I do think it will, it will recoup.
Yeah, and I think it's just important for people. You feel what you do fills a very important role because a lot of the large labels have sort of given up on artist development in a way, and they're going straight to like social media and finding artists from social media who are popular already. But to get there, you've got to have somebody working with the artist, telling them how to, or letting them know how to approach social media and that kind of thing. And in terms of artists with social media, what's some of your biggest takeaways and some successes that you've had that other artists could pull from?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so firstly, I completely agree. Like, and you can kind of understand both sides to it, but like labels and distributors, I mean, everyone in the music industry is kind of trying to de-risk what they invest in for obvious reasons, the economy, etc. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for taking risks on new artists or giving people the time to fail as well. It was, I think, in the recent well, off the back of Robbie Williams' recent sort of film coming out, I think in an interview recently, he said, I 100% would have got dropped if I was an artist around today. And it's like, then we wouldn't have Robbie Williams or
A
whoever
lot of
else.
artists, yeah, right, because a lot of
Um,
artists before used to allow an album, some singles to come out and develop them, but that's kind of gone, right?
yeah, it's if you don't hit certain, metrics, you're often dropped, which is a real shame. And then I mean, in terms of social media, it's obviously super important, which is annoying, but also not annoying in some ways. Most artists I speak to come, with an approach of, "Oh, I really don't like social media. I feel like I have to be present on there. I just want to make the music and gig," which you can understand. And I think a lot of my job has actually been trying to find ways to, I guess, reframe that for them and go, look, social media is what it is. It's here right now and it is important. You don't want to be just a social media artist because we've seen how some of those signings have gone, where, we have like a viral TikTok hit, but it's a one-hit wonder. They get signed and then nothing happens and their career doesn't, continue. We've also seen people signed off social media who have gone on to have fantastic careers because they, could keep up with, writing loads of songs, writing loads of good songs, gigging, touring. But if you can't bring down, 50 people to a gig, but you have a viral song like that, there's a problem there. And then the task of the label is to try and make that happen. But if they can't, then there's not too much of a viable career if it's not carrying over to streaming or gigs or anything like that. You are then what people would call an influencer, and that you can monetize other ways, maybe through brand partnerships, but yeah, not through the sort of traditional music kind of models. So yeah, a lot of my work is around reframing and going, look, social media is a tool. It's kind of there for you to communicate with your potential fans and find them. And I mean, in a way, like TikTok has a really high discoverability rate, which is a good thing, versus on Instagram, it's a little bit harder to get put in front of new people. So take advantage of that, try and, build stuff up because there is a way to balance the two. And I mean, I've seen some really nice sort of results off the back of that. Someone who didn't even have a TikTok get up to like 10,000 followers within a couple of months just through going, look, okay, fine. Like kind of just giving in and going,
Like,
fine,
yeah, I'm gonna do it
I'll
anyways.
post. Yeah. And I'm also a big advocate for like not telling people to like post 3 times a day because that's been, the whole hustle culture, post 3 times a day, post constantly. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I would rather you post good stuff 2 or 3 times a week. And if you've never posted, start with posting once a week. I'm okay with that. Go to two, then go to three. Um, and what's really interesting is actually speaking to someone at Instagram. They actually are preferring like less but higher quality content now. So if you're kind of posting, roughly twice a week, but it's all high quality. So let's say about 10 real posts a month, and they're really good quality in terms of both how they're filmed, but also the content itself. you'll do just as well. After that point, like you don't get anything extra for posting more. So that's an interesting shift as well. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what a lot of my work has ended up being.
What do you feel about in terms of, and I think that's all great information, and I agree. Like, I think quality is super important, and I think a lot of the artists too that have been successful coming off of Instagram, TikTok, they were actually people that were out there already gigging, doing clubs. Like it, some people become viral, but then, like you said, when they go live or when they try to play a venue, they don't know how to do that. They've never done it, and that's definitely like a college class unto itself.
Totally.
What do you think about on Instagram in terms of releasing albums versus singles? What's your thought on that? I'm sorry, you're
Um,
not Instagram, Spotify. Sorry.
got you. Yeah, so I mean, everyone's kind of moved to singles, and where that has come from my experience, is the fact that basically when you're releasing stuff on digital platforms. So for streaming, every time you release a song, it's a chance to get pitched essentially for like playlist inclusions. So if I had 10 songs and I just released them all at once, that's one chance I have to be put in front of the editors or to have the algorithm going or whatever. Versus if I released 10 times and they were all singles, that's 10 times it's going. So it's kind of 10 chances. So that's why a lot of the advice has been, directing people towards singles. Also, sort of consumption data generally has said that a lot of people follow songs now, less so albums. So, kind of how people consume music has changed. So that's kind of, I guess, stuff I know versus like, I guess, stuff that I personally like. I mean, I kind of flip between the two.
Hmm.
I'm, I am a fan of an album. Sometimes it depends on the album. I love concept albums. It kind of really depends. But then at the same time, like I'm kind of okay with singles and or them ending up being an EP, for example, not even a full album. But I guess my general advice to artists starting out would be 100% start with singles. Like don't limit yourself at this point. Start with singles for as long as you kind of feel okay with it. If you want to have a project, do an EP. I would really tell them to save the album for when, if they do aspire to sign a deal of some kind, be it like a record deal or a distribution deal that's funded or something like that. I would save the album for then. Oftentimes people want the first album. It's quite a big moment. So yeah, I would say stick to singles and EPs and there's kind of more benefit in doing that.
Yeah, I agree, and I have some friends that have actually talked quite a bit to folks at Spotify, and that's exactly what they were told, that they would prefer the best method is maybe putting a single out a month, and then once you get all the singles from the album out, then put out the album. Which, and I agree with you too. I love albums. I love full albums that have this kind of a story aspect to it. But that's kind of my old school way of thinking, I guess. I don't know. I'm old musician guy. So talking about advice to artists. So what are some of the key things that when you get a new artist, what are some of the key things that you would tell them or people that are listening?
I think one of the key things that I always start with is like essentially it could probably be described as brand like positioning, but like who do you want to be? And specifically, who do you want to be versus like who do you think you should be? What type of music do you think you should be making? What TikTok trend do you think you should be chasing or anything like that? And just trying to really find out one, like why they want to do this, because to me, there's no right or wrong answer, even if someone says, oh, because I want to make loads of money. Then I'd go, cool, that's a fair answer. But
Sure. Yeah.
maybe don't do music if that's the case.
Maybe you're in the wrong
Or
business. But
yeah, like have you thought about finance?
exactly.
But at the same time, like if that is your goal and that's paired up with, I love making music and I'm gonna work really hard at this. Okay, cool. We're aiming for Ed Sheeran level, we're not aiming for like a mid-level artist who you might not know their name, but they make a great income, and there's tons of those. Um, there's like
Absolutely.
quite a big sort of like what I call a music industry middle class, but people who make a fantastic sort of salary, but you might not know their name and they love their job and they don't, have the stresses that come with, being someone like Ed Sheeran or anything like that. So working that out, I think is really important. So like what do you want and why do you want to do this? Like what's the motivation? And tons of people, like more and more even say to me, like, I just want to make a living off music. And I'm like, okay, well, what's a living to you? And they go, X amount. And you're like, cool, that's a pretty sort of like average salary. There's loads of ways to do that. And then seeing whether they're comfortable, supplementing it in different ways or within music, are they open to, I don't know, teaching in music or session playing, or is it, purely original stuff they want to do? And you kind of just breaking that down, I think, and looking at like what budget do you actually want to, well, what budget do you need and stuff like that. And then kind of moving on to the next bit, which is the sort of brand positioning and going, okay, well, who are your references? And I feel like when you are the artist, you have references in mind. And then I always find that I look at it and go, okay, but and we end up sort of working out loads more. And I usually do it through this like triangle. I call it like the A&R triangle. But it's basically an exercise that I kind of take people through. The rough sort of philosophy being there's three sides to every artist. You sit in the middle and every corner represents something different. And it should be really detailed and you should have big references and then sort of find the smaller artists who are like them. They're worth looking at because they have similar resource to you versus if you look at Ed Sheeran, you can't compete because he's got 500 people working on his stuff and a huge budget. Yeah, and kind of taking people through that.
Yeah, and don't you think that it's important to, you kind of mentioned this, but defining what success means to you versus what it means to the world. That's super important, do you think?
It's so important. I think that's just important for everyone. And I feel like it's such a current like topic. It's so like timely now as well, because I think the reality is like a lot of people, particularly in the arts, have been, struggling more than they have been. Just everyone kind of is, the economies haven't been as great as they have been. But looking at what success is to you versus what we're kind of told is super important because the sort of the line of success really is kind of one thing. It's like unless you're doing the top things all the time, you're no good. And it's like, well, the reality is only a very small percentage of people are going to do that. And even then, I've spoken to, worked with so many people who have been at that point and they hate it. So it's like if you kind of asked them that question earlier, they would have gone, it wasn't even what I wanted. I kind of saw, I kind of call it like in the Wizard of Oz, when you kind of go behind the curtain and you kind of see what was behind it this whole time, and then you just go,
Exactly.
oh, this wasn't at all what I wanted or expected. I would have been way happier doing that. Um,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think I found that for myself. Like, it's interesting when you talk to people and you ask them what does success mean to you, and some will say money, some will say I want to be happy, some will say whatever their own personal thing is. But everybody has to figure that out. It's good to challenge artists in that and ask them that what their perspective is. How can people reach you if they want to talk with you, if they want to maybe send material to you?
Sure. So, I mean, they can go to my website. There's a form there. It's just nikkicamilleri.com. So my name.com.
Yeah, can you
Uh,
spell your name?
yes, I can try.
Yeah, okay,
It's NIKKICAMILLERI.com.
perfect.
That's also my handle on social media. So you'll find me on Instagram or equally on LinkedIn under the same name.
Awesome. And I thank you so much for joining me and telling me about your company. It's really interesting. You're definitely a mover and shaker, and I appreciate the fact that you make the effort not only to help artists but also take the time and help them develop their craft, which is super important.
No worries. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great evening in London. It's morning in Las Vegas. So
Oh, fair. Well, have a great day.
awesome. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks so much.
Bye.